With just 2 weeks left to go in the regular season, the playoff push is in full force. Week 8 and 9 lead to a lot of chaos when it comes to the seedings of the playoffs. We will give a quick recap of Week 7, look into Week 8, and then take a deeper look into the playoff projection models and outlooks. I am your host, Kyle Kampmeyer. Let's get started right now.
Need a fresh look for your home? Neff Paints, based in Warren, Illinois, is the local expert in interior and exterior painting, staining, and power washing. Serving Galena, Dubuque, Lake Carroll, Apple Canyon Lake, Lena, and beyond, Neff Paints uses premium products for lasting quality. Contact Skylar at 815-541-7338 for a free estimate and let your home shine inside and out.
Taking a look at 8-man Amboy has bounced back well after their Week 5 loss to Ridgewood as they continue to put up big scores once again. They're going to see another playoff team this week with West Central. The Heat suffered their first loss of the season to Flanagan Cornell Woodland 41-26. They play Amboy this week in a rematch of the 2022 state championship game. Amboy beat FCW 2 weeks ago, 46-14. This will be an upward battle for the Heat in Week 8. Speaking of the Falcons, they picked up win number 6 against West Central and now get another big test with one of the state favorites in Ridgewood. Ridgewood has been on a roll since their Week 1 loss to Amboy, knocking out 6 straight wins, including a Week 5 rematch win over Amboy. They finished the season with 2 more playoff opponents, and this week they play host to FCW. South Fork picked up the most important win, number 5 over Oblong, to qualify for the playoffs. Now they get 2 straight weeks of playoff caliber games where they enter both as underdogs. Will the cards hold? Or can the ponies fit into the slipper of Cinderella and win some more games? Martinsville took their first loss of the season on the chin to Pawnee. A 12-8 halftime lead led to a 42-12 smackdown in favor of Pawnee in the second half. They now hit the road to face perennial power Milford-Cisna Park in a game many around the state will be keeping tabs on. The Bearcats are coming off their second forfeit win on the season. They have 2 games remaining against South Power's Martinsville and Pawnee. Will the Bearcats be ready? That is the question. Their last high-quality opponent came back in Week 5. Pawnee picked up that big win over Martinsville. A few critics think that we should have them ranked in our top 2. While we can leave that topic up for debate, the Indians have a good mix of run and pass with playmakers that can keep you honest and pose a deep playoff threat. 8-0 is a sure thing heading into Week 9 with that matchup with Milford-Cisna Park. St. Anne qualified for the playoffs with a lopsided win over Unity Christian. They should get another big win this week ahead of their Week 9 playoff tune-up game with South Fork. St. Thomas More will play host to South Fork this week. Some talk around Champaign is that the Sabres are a threat to get to Monmouth. However, with losses to St. Anne and Pawnee within the first 2 weeks of the season, the Sabres have turned it on against lower-level competition. Their marquee win was over Milford-Cisna Park in Week 4. Now, with South Fork coming to town, they have the opportunity to get another playoff-quality game under their belt. Milledgeville took the loss from Polo and turned it around into a romp of playoff qualifier South Beloit 40-0. The Missiles don't have any tests left on the schedule, which is the time of year we have seen them coast and then disappear in the quarterfinals. There is no doubt that the Missiles will finish 8-1, but can they change the mindset to be prepared for that playoff run? Orangeville had an opportunity against West Carroll, and after getting down 14-0, they came back to tie it up at 14-all. West Carroll then regained the lead 20-14 heading into the half, but Orangeville never responded in the second half as the Thunder all but assured that the Broncos may miss the playoffs. They'll need to get an upset win in Week 9 or hope for other upsets to have a shot at the playoffs. West Carroll opened up the gates in the second half win as they put Orangeville away 44-14. Now, they play host to the juggernaut Polo Marcos. This may be the other wake-up call ahead of what the playoffs will look like for the Thunder. Polo has one playoff team left on their schedule as they go to Savannah to play West Carroll. Barring upsets, the Marcos will sew up the number 2 seed and finish at 9-0. South Beloit will rebound from the gut punch they took from Milledgeville and get win number 6 under their belts. Week 9 will give us a deeper look at the Sobos as they play West Carroll. In NUIC action, Galena picked up their 5th win of the year to become playoff eligible for the first time since 2021. A big game this week with number 2 ranked Lena Winslow will tell us where the Pirates stand. A rivalry game with Stockton looms large in Week 9. Lena Winslow fell behind and battled back. Fell behind again and battled back. Fell behind again and then battled back for good against EPC on Friday night. A back-and-forth first half led to second half dominance for the Panthers as they wore the Wildcats down and picked up their 25th consecutive regular season win. That power hits a Pirates team boosting with excitement. Du-Pec came back from Lena and walked away with a big win over Fulton. Now they get on the road twice, with a huge playoff indicator matchup in Week 9 against Seneca. A good seed for Du-Pec could lead to a decent playoff run for the Rivermen. Stockton made fast work of Morrison, and some people got upset that Stockton ran up the score. Last time I checked, guys, there is a 40-point mercy rule for a reason. General rule of thumb here is that to wave the white flag, if you are on the losing side, you begin subbing first. Then the winning team will respond and do the same thing. Stockton had every right to get a 40-point difference. Most teams play that way before subbing, unless it's late in the game. But, oh well. One more win for the Blackhawks, and they will be playoff eligible for the first time since 2019. EPC had nothing to lose last week except a share of the conference title. They already have 5 wins and are playoff eligible. And they stand a good chance at a first-round home playoff game. With a good draw, EPC can also make some noise during the playoffs if they can be healthy. Another decent test awaits them as they go down to Morrison, a longtime arch nemesis for the Cats. We will break down these matchups coming up next. Before we get started into our breakdown of this week's games, just got to give a quick shout out to A View from the West podcast with Mitch and Greg. Thanks for the shirt, fellas. Football is hard. Love the shirt. If you haven't already, get on their Twitter page, get some gear for View from the West. I love collaborating with those guys. They do a great job for promoting small school football within the western side of the state. And you know, they're a great listen every single week. I enjoy getting on with them and the opportunities that they provide me to join them on their show too. So get on there, help support those guys as they continue to help build up small school football right alongside myself. Looking at the NUIC, the first game we have is Stockton at Dakota. The Blackhawks enter this game at 4-3, while Dakota is 0-7. The Blackhawks can get a win this week and get back in the playoffs. When playing at the caliber they can be a formidable foe for anyone in the postseason. The scarier thing is the Hawks are young, only having 2 seniors on this roster. A good run this year can build into a bigger run next year. We've seen that play out many times in years past. Dakota, on the other hand, they have to play for some pride. Obviously, it's not the season that they wanted. They don't have the numbers that they want. But at the end of the day, you still have to go out there and play. And when you do that, you bring a lot of things into the community that can be a feel-good story. While it's not the season that they've hoped for, there's still some upside things that they can continue to look at and build onto for the future. Du-Pec takes the road down to Forreston, where the Rivermen enter this game at 6-1. Forreston comes in at 2-5. Cooper Hoffman keeps dealing for the Rivermen as he chases down some records held by former Aquin great William Gustafson. It's not just the Hoffman show, however, Du-Pec, as some other guys have really stepped up to help the cause. Guys like Dermot Dolan and Lucas Rousseau in the run game. Jackson Diedrich and Brody Black have stood out the most in the passing game. Forreston continues to run behind Dane Setterstrom and Evan Bettner, but this has not been the season for the Cards. They will miss out on the playoffs for the first time since 2009. In this matchup, you got Du-Pec looking to continue to move forward and improve their seeding in the playoffs. Forreston's looking to wreck somebody's day. At the end of the day, again, one team's playing for pride, playing for whatever they have left to play for, while Du-Pec has a lot to play for. There's a lot of things that they need to start looking at, setting up, trying out things that can help them at the same time while securing wins in order to increase and improve their playoff seeding. Look for a good game here. It's been a good one in past years. See how it formulates this week, but Du-Pec is the heavy favorite. Galena gets ready to host the number 2 ranked Lena Winslow Panthers as Lena Winslow comes in with a perfect record at 7-0, while Galena has a 5-2 record. The turnaround for Galena from last year to this year has been exceptional. Now, they run into the team that has dominated the NUIC in the same way that Galena did in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. The Panthers are looking for their 26th consecutive NUIC win and have not completely captured the conference title yet, although it is likely they will. Galena looks to disrupt that at Chuck Cordy Field this week. Both teams come in with different things that they can do. Obviously, Lena Winslow's line has been a huge advantage point for them all season long, provided that combined with their run game with Alex Schlichting and Aiden Wild, along with a couple other guys. But at the end of the day, Galena has a great run game. They do more of a pass option type run game. Really feel that this game is going to play benefit to Lena Winslow because at the end of the day, in big games like these, you have to win at the line of scrimmage. And right now in the NUIC, nobody has a better line than the Panthers. So I think it'll be close to begin with. In the first half, Lena Winslow will start to stretch that come the second half. EPC travels to Morrison as the Wildcats enter this game at 5-2, and Morrison enters at 3-4. The Wildcats can officially punch their ticket to the playoffs with a win. The Mustangs need to win this game to keep their playoff hopes alive ahead of their wooden shoe rivalry game with Fulton in Week 9. This will be a big game for both teams as far as the playoffs are concerned. EPC did suffer an injury last week to their quarterback, Adam Allwender, who went out at the end of the first half against Lena Winslow. Barring any other setbacks, EPC definitely has the team that I feel can make a deep playoff run come the Class 2A playoffs. This game may just be a tone setter and a tune-up game for the Wildcats, but at the same token, they have to be able to show that they can play with one man down. Morrison, on the other hand, is in somewhat of the same boat. They lost Donnie Reevy a couple weeks ago to a knee injury that put him out for the season. And since then, the Mustangs have been trying to find what their true identity is. Sitting at 3-4 currently, they do have an opportunity to pull off an upset in this game, setting up that wooden shoe rivalry game in Week 9 for a bigger piece of the pie with a big game on the line. But it's going to come down to Morrison playing a full game and being able to do some things at the line of scrimmage, in which I feel that EPC is a lot stronger in that area in this game. EPC will come in as the heavy favorites to win this game. Knoxville comes up to Fulton this week as both teams enter with matching records at 2-5. The picture of this game really means nothing for the playoffs, but the winner will help their conference teams that are making the playoffs out by giving them an additional playoff point. The Steamers ran away with this game a year ago when both teams did make the playoffs. A lot of people down in Knoxville were a little upset or surprised that I was picking Fulton to beat them last season. However, at the end of the day, you got to know what one team does successfully to what one team's weaknesses are, and Fulton was able to expose the Blue Bullets to a 43-0 win. While both teams are looking a little down this year, and their records obviously are going to keep them both out of the playoffs, I do expect Fulton to come in ready to go and get ready for that big game against Morrison in Week 9.
This portion of our broadcast is brought to you by Diedrich Epoxy Flooring. Serving northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin, Diedrich Epoxy is the source for all of your epoxy needs. Give Diedrich Epoxy Flooring a call today at 815-239-1158 for your free estimate.
Moving over to 8-man football, Orangeville takes the road to AFC as the Broncos enter at 3-4, while AFC enters at 0-7. This is a must-win game for Orangeville to keep their playoff hopes alive. It shouldn't take them long to get this one in control, but they need to work on some things to help prepare them for Week 9 and a big game against perennial power Polo. There's really not a lot to write home about this game, as Orangeville should get a running clock pretty quickly here. But expect Orangeville to continue to look to get to 4-4 and hopefully bring out a better opportunity of a contest in Polo next week. River Ridge travels to Milledgeville as the Wildcats are 2-5 and the Missiles are 6-1. The Wildcats have endured some tough games this year with a young squad. Unfortunately, now they get to play the powerhouse Missiles, who bounced back well after their loss to Polo the week before. River Ridge quarterback Damon Dittmer has been the guy that's been carrying the team all season long. Congratulations to Damon on just surpassing 2,000 career passing yards. Excellent accomplishment there. However, this game is going to belong to Milledgeville. The Missiles are trying to prove that they can be prepared for a long, deep playoff run. The loss to Polo in the rivalry game, I would imagine, only stroked that fire a little bit more to get them more geared up and focused for what the task is coming up ahead. Once we hit that playoffs, there's a good chance that the top 9 teams, we're going to see 8 of them in that quarterfinal round, getting through the first round relatively easy. And then, as years past have shown us, the quarterfinals on really heat up in that IHSA playoff bracket. Milledgeville's looking to get deeper and finally break the curse of that quarterfinal round. Polo hits the road to West Carroll as the Marcos enter at 7-0, and the Thunder come in with a 6-1 record. Polo has allowed 34 points all season, with only 14 of those coming against their starting defense. On paper, West Carroll looks good, and it has been a great rags to riches type of story for the Thunder. However, the clock is going to run out on West Carroll this week, as Polo should provide the Thunder with another wake-up call to show them where the level of play stands at the top of the IHSA. West Carroll has shown some good things, especially with the pass game of Winter Harrington and then the run game of Aiden Buchholz. And provided that they can continue to keep those things going and get some more play action in there, they can definitely make a run for their money where it really stands tall and obvious is West Carroll has to get more improved on line play. Polo, well, they have probably one of the best lines I've seen so far to date, hence why they're the number one ranked team in IHSA, and well, they're undefeated for that purpose too, because they beat a pretty good Milledgeville squad who I felt also had a very good line as well. So, people look at 8-man football and they're like, oh, well, it's 8-man football. You just got to chuck it and run. Well, that's not the case. In 8-man football, same as 11-man football, you still win the games at the line of scrimmage. Polo has that advantage in this one. Look for them to come out big.
Our 8-man game of the week is brought to you by Best Realty. Best Realty has been helping Northern Illinois tackle their real estate needs since 1990. Whether you're buying or selling in the market for residential, commercial, or acreage, they'll help you get the best deal. Call the Best Realty team at 815-248-3408 or visit them online at bestrealtyproperties.com.
Our Best Realty game of the week takes us to Biggsville, where West Central will play host to Amboy, as both teams enter this big matchup with 6-1 records. A rematch of the 2022 state championship game features the last two state champions. West Central is bouncing back from a 3-6 season a year ago, whereas the Clippers were undefeated last year and a favorite coming into the 2024 season. While the Clippers still remain a favorite despite a loss to Ridgewood back in Week 5, West Central has had an exceptional start to the season until last week's loss to FCW. When comparing what both teams have done against FCW, this game definitely tends to favor in the way of Amboy very largely. While Amboy comes into our state rankings ranked number 3 this week, they are still the number 1 rated team in 8-man football according to the Freeman ratings. That just goes to show you how tough Amboy really was and can be, as their loss is to Ridgewood, a team that they also beat back in Week 1. We should see how it trends, but that game between Amboy and Ridgewood that Ridgewood did win, the Spartans definitely looked every bit of a title contender in that game. And when you take a look at the full scope of things, West Central's got some things that they got to work on in order to make this a game out of it and show that they're ready for another playoff run. We'll see how it comes about, but Amboy is the heavy favorite here. All right, we're going to change things up a little bit this week. If you want to check out our state rankings, go to NUIC Football on Facebook and or at NUIC Football on Twitter/X. You can find our state rankings there where we've already posted them for the week. In the meantime, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a quick look into that awesome playoff picture. So, we're going to start on the 11-man side of things, and then we'll come back to the 8-man side of things. Looking at 11-man as a full scope, okay? First off, first thing that has to happen, the 256-team field has to be set before classifications are set. I love that people are following along with what we're doing, but when you sit here and you start messaging me or commenting at me that, oh, this team's always 3A or this team's always 2A, it's not how it works. I don't care what classification your team was in 4 years ago when you were in high school. Enrollments change. Therefore, when enrollments change, which happens every 2 years now with the new enrollment cycle being on a 2-year cycle, enrollments change means your team could slide up and or down or, potentially definitely stay the same. But when you're on the low end and you lose enrollment and you drop lower, that's going to put you on the bubble for the classification behind you. Anyway, enough of that. Hopefully everybody understands. 256 team field has to be set, then classifications get set. That's how the IHSA system works. It's been working that way for a long time. It's an unbiased system. It simply takes wins in playoff points. Now, the next big question is, what are playoff points? Playoff points are simply your opponent's wins added up. That's it. It's that simple. So wins, playoff points. Most wins and the most playoff points get the highest seed. The next get the next seed, and it just tears its way down. So, with that said, so far in 11-man football, 102 spots have been filled with teams that have 6 wins or more, meaning we have 102 teams officially punched their tickets to the 2024 playoffs. 67 teams have 5 wins. Now, those 67 teams are technically playoff eligible. They have not technically clinched a playoff spot. With that said, 256 teams make the playoff field. There are 493 teams that can be playoff eligible in IHSA this season, provided that they qualify for the playoffs. But 493 teams, just 493 is all that's available to actually make the playoffs, provided they meet the criteria. So, with that said, chances are, just like the last 2 seasons, which is another question that gets brought up, how are 4-win teams making the playoffs? Well, when you have 256 teams, not all 50% of them are going to make it with 5 wins. Now, there's still a possibility that that can happen. Last year there was like 5 or 6 teams, if I remember correctly. I think it was 5 that made it in with 4 wins. The year before was 1 team that made it in with 4 wins. This year, we've looked at the potential of 12 teams making in with 4 wins. We've looked at the potential of 8 teams to 9 teams making in with 4 wins. Right now, the current picture has reduced that further to where it might be about 5 to 6 teams making in with 4 wins, which would put us back to, an area that we were at last year. So, that means that between the 102 teams that have actually clinched the playoff spots, the 67 teams that have already reached 5 wins to become playoff eligible, there's still another 87 spots that need to be filled. We have over 150 plus teams that enter week 8 with 3 or 4 wins. That is going to set up some extreme chaos potentially in weeks 8 and 9. Last couple of years, week 8 has pretty much gone as projected with very little chaos. Week 9 always seems to be that week where everything just falls off the table. So we'll see how it all plays out here. So the next question is, once you have the 256 team field, how do the classifications begin? Well, it's relatively simple there too. Once you have the 256 team field set, you can either start at the top in Class 8A and grab the highest enrolled 32 teams and work your way down, or you can start at the bottom in 1A, grab the smallest 32 teams and work your way up. Either way, you can do it. It's pretty simple. You just got to be able to have a little bit of patience, pay attention to your enrollments, pay attention to what teams can actually make the playoffs, and then put it all together and let it play out for yourself. Anyway, looking at teams of interest in Class 1A, I only have a handful to look at. These are the ones that I'm really intrigued on as we head into week 8 this week. First one is Route Catholic. Route, at one point, was right in the middle of our playoff projections. and since have fallen out. They sit at 4-3. Their next two games are against Greenfield Northwestern and Carrollton. Both teams have found their way into the state rankings at one point or another. Greenfield Northwestern's been in the state rankings most of the year or all year, depending on what poll you look at. AP, my poll, it don't matter. Carrollton has gone from a team that was projected to be 4-5, and now, because of some upset wins that they were able to pull off, are now looking at potentially being definitely 5-4, possibly 6-3, and have worked their way back into being in the playoff field. That's who Rout's got to play. They have to be able to win one of these games this week. If they win one of these games, that's going to throw the playoff picture into a whole nother realm, because I'll put another 5-win team in, knock another 4-win team out potentially. Along with, it's going to change the classification cutoff for Class 1A. Simply being because right now, where I have it projected and where I saw Steve Stussy have it projected as well, we both have the projected cutoff for Class 1A currently sitting at 304.5, with Bloomington Central Catholic being the last team into the 1A field, coming down from 2A. So that's one team I'm looking at. Another team I'm looking at is Chicago Military Academy Bronzeville. They play in the Chicago Public League in the White South Central Conference. Now, if you paid attention to some of the things I've said over this past week or two, the Chicago Public League has 4 divisions that only have 8 games on schedule. The conference champions in those 4 games, or in those 4 divisions, will earn an automatic berth into the playoff field. The teams that finish in second place, regardless if they meet the playoff criteria on wins, the second place teams will get paired up with each other in week 9. The winner of those 2 games will be the 2 additional teams added to the playoff field. So out of the 4 divisions, you'll have 4 conference champions and 2 more teams for a total of 6 that will be able to play in the IHSA playoffs. Military Academy Bronzeville is one of those teams. They are a 1A school. They have to play Noble Comer this week, in week 8, for a chance to play in that week 9 game to earn a spot into the playoff field. If they lose this week against Noble Comer, they're done. They're out. If they beat Noble Comer, then whoever they get paired up with in week 9, they win that game, they would be in the playoff field. That too could shift the 1A cutoff. The next team is Chicago Hope. They currently sit at 3-4. They have games coming up with both conference foes in Bishop McNamara and Christ the King. And both those teams also sit at 3-4. Chicago Hope is a team that we have projected into the playoffs. I have projected into the playoffs. I believe Susie has them projected in the playoffs as well. They are favored to win both of these games, hence why I have them projected into the playoff field. But if they were to lose one of those games, they're not necessarily out of the playoff picture, as they sit currently at 38 playoff points. But that could put them outside of the bubble at the same time. I don't want to say 38 points is the soft space to be at currently. It's not a bad place to be. But when looking at it, you got about 5 or 6 teams that were in between 39 to 41 points entering week 8, sitting in the same position as Hope. And if they get one more win, We're only looking at a potential 5 to 6 teams to get in, and Hope loses one of these 2 upcoming games. There's a good shot that Hope won't have enough playoff points to get in. And speaking of that playoff point cutoff, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I said about 48 to 49 points. At one point, we were looking at 47 points. Right now, I'm still sitting firm at 48 to 49 points as needed, but it could still go higher yet, depending on where we get with this, with these weeks coming up, and see what teams we have. Obviously, we're getting a very good picture here, but it can still change. Another team to look at is Rova Williamsfield, as they are 3-4. They have to play Anawan Wethersfield this week, and then A-Town in week 9. Rova Williamsfield has to win both games in order to make the playoffs. The interesting part is that the 5th team I'm looking at is Anawan Wethersfield themselves. They have to win one game. If Anawan Wethersfield loses this game to Rova Williamsfield, Rova Williamsfield could make the playoffs. They are favored to beat A-Town in week 9. Anawan Wethersfield also could still make the playoffs because they have a relatively favorable schedule, I believe, still remaining as their week. No, they don't. So that's where it's at. Anawan Wethersfield and Rova Williamsfield. Rova Williamsfield has to beat Anawan Wethersfield, and they are favored in week 9. Anawan Wethersfield has to beat Rova Williamsfield because they have Princeville in week 9, in which has been a pretty good rivalry type of game. So even Princeville sitting with an undefeated record. Currently, they are the favorites over Anawan Wethersfield, but I would not put them as necessarily the team to win. When you get into the rivalry games, you can throw those records out the window. Anawan Wethersfield has pretty much owned Princeville over the last few years. I know that Anawan Wethersfield was playing a little injured early in the year, but this game between Anawan Wethersfield and Rova Williamsfield this week is a big one for both teams and what their potential playoff projections look like. Over in Class 2A, a team I'm looking at as well is El Paso Gridley. They currently sit at 4-3. Their next game this week is against Tremont, who is 0-7. Should be an easy win for EPG to get in there. And then they finish out with Clinton. Clinton could be a game that could be up for grabs. But EPG is a team that I had initially projected to be 4-5 and missing the playoffs. They got a big win last week against Shelbyville, which then automatically catapulted them into the playoff projection field because they sit at 4 wins. They're favored to beat Tremont to get that 5th win. Talking about 4-win teams potentially making the playoffs, as we have been looking at all season long. 5 wins for EPG gets them in the playoffs. They should get that 5th win this week. Sangamon Valley is another team that has now entered their name into the playoff talk, as they too beat Arcola last week to improve to 4-3. Arcola was once the team projected to go into the playoffs, as they were the favorite over Sangamon Valley. Sangamon Valley got the big win over the Purple Riders. They sit at 4-3. They have Villa Grove this week, who they are favored to beat to get that 5th win. And then Nokomis hangs out there in week 9, which is a game that Nokomis is currently favored to win. But we should see Sangamon Valley pick up win number 5 this week to help put their stamp onto the 2024 playoff field. The last team I'm looking at in Class 2A currently that has piqued my interest is Mater Dei, who currently sits at 3-4. They have 38 playoff points. Looking at their games and projecting it out, they should finish the season with 48 playoff points if they go 4-5, which means that if they go 5-4, they should have 47 playoff points, and even at 5-4 and 47 playoff points, they're going to be in the playoffs because they would have more points than a lot of teams finishing at 5-4 as it is. With that said, I've been projecting Mater Dei into the playoff field at 4-5 every week so far this season when I've been projecting the playoffs. And that is because at 4-5, we're looking at anywhere from 8 to 12 teams getting in. They were going to be a sure bet to get in with the playoff points that they have. Now, with some of that looking down and the number of playoff teams that are going to reach 5 wins growing potentially, with the 4-win projection looking a little bit lower, Mater Dei is not so much a sure bet to get in even if they get to 4 wins. So, for sure, they need to get to 5 wins to make the playoffs. 4 wins, they're going to be on that bubble on playoff points in order to make the playoff field. Moving into Class 3A, really, there's only 2 teams I'm really intrigued on in Class 3A, as out of the 3 smallest classes, Class 3A really has had the most stabilization all season long. The teams that are supposed to win have been pretty much winning, and the teams that were supposed to lose have lost. So really, there has not been a lot of fluctuation in Class 3A. The only thing affecting Class 3A is basically what teams are affecting the field and where the cutoff is going to be. Outside of that, the teams within that field haven't really done a whole lot except do what they're supposed to do, and that's win the ball games that they were supposed to win. Genoa Kingston, however, is one of those teams I'm looking at. They currently enter with a 3-4 record. They have Rock Falls and Rockford Lutheran left on their schedule. Genoa Kingston came into the season as a team that we were definitely looking at making the playoffs. We had them in our early playoff field. However, last week they lost to Stillman Valley, who they were favored to beat, which kind of flipped that playoff picture around and now put Stillman Valley into that playoff projection. But what intrigues me about Genoa Kingston is they have Rock Falls this week. They should win that, get to 4-4. Then they go on the road to Rockford to play Rockford Lutheran. And when you take a look at some of their games in comparison with each other, while Rockford Lutheran is the favorite, and I have them projected as such, Genoa Kingston definitely has a shot here against Rockford Lutheran to get that 5th win and still get into that playoff field, which would then in turn put another 5-win team into the playoffs. And it's going to shift that bubble around again with the playoff, with the classification cutoff. So keep a lookout for Genoa Kingston. Not this week. They should take care of business this week. It's going to be next week in week 9 when they play Rockford Lutheran. Rockford Lutheran is already a team with 5 wins and looking to are already basically projected into the Class 1A playoffs. The last team to look at in Class 3A is another of the Chicago Public League teams, which is Chicago Phoenix. They currently sit at 5-2, which most teams sitting at 5-2 are like, yes, we're playoff eligible, we're into the playoffs. While they have the criteria to be playoff eligible, they currently sit in 2nd place in the Chicago Public League White West Division. They are going to be one of the 2nd place teams that have to get paired up in week 9 and have to win that week 9 matchup in order to make the playoffs. I currently believe I have Phoenix in the playoff field as one of the favorites to get in. But that can all change very, very quickly. Because if they lose that Week 9 game, they will not qualify for the playoffs. So I do have them projected in as the largest team in Class 3A, which has the cutoff at 559. If they lose that Week 9 game, that's going to bring another team down into Class 3A and shift that field and raise that cutoff a little bit higher. And that team would be Chicago South Shore, who has actually already won their conference title and received the automatic bid out of the CPL White South Central Conference. So they're already into the playoffs. They are on the bubble of being a 4A team or a 3A team. So that's where I stand with Class 3A. Now, here's some games to watch across 11-man. We have Byron at Dixon this week. Byron, obviously, the number one ranked team in Class 3A. Dixon's been bouncing around between being ranked number 2 and number 3 in Class 4A. They square off for the Big Northern title this week. It should be some big fireworks in that one, as Caden Considine is expected to make his return to the Byron Tiger backfield. Moving down into 1A, we have Gibson City Melvin Sibley will play on the road at Leroy. Both teams are 7-0. While it's not a game that is going to determine playoffs, so to speak, it is going to affect seeding because both teams are projected to be in the 1A North bracket. In the Sangamo, we have another big game down there as Maroa Forsyth travels to Williamsville. Both teams are undefeated in conference play. So the Sangamo Conference Championship is on the line between the number 1 ranked team in Class 2A and one of the top 10 ranked teams in Class 3A in Williamsville. Princeville gets on the road to Rushville Industry. That's another game that has a little bit of interest. Princeville's undefeated. Rushville is 6-1. Tolono Unity has been a team that we've been looking at all season long. People were reaching out to me. You think Tolono Unity is going to beat Paxton Buckley Loda and Monticello and, get in the playoffs at 6-3? Well, I'll tell you what, Tolono Unity did start off the year ranked as one of the top teams in Class 3A. They did lose that close game to St. Joseph Ogden early in the season. St. Joseph Ogden kind of has become the front runner of the Illini Prairie Conference. They've already played Monticello. Monticello's lone loss came to St. Joe Ogden in Week 1, while Tolono Unity did lose a close one to St. Joe Ogden, closer than what Monticello lost to in Week 2 by 3 points. Then Tolono Unity lost that back and forth affair with Althoff Catholic, who's ranked number 1 in Class 1A. But they did have a little hiccup with Bloomington Central Catholic, who was a team that, was one of the preseason favorites in the Illini Prairie Conference, who has also lost some close games to Paxton Buckley Loda, Monticello, and then they did lose a 3-score game to St. Joseph Ogden just 2 weeks ago. But Tolono Unity playing at Paxton Buckley Loda. The Rockets are 4-3. Paxton Buckley Loda comes in at 6-1. I do feel that you're going to see Tolono Unity pick up win number 5 to get themselves in the playoffs. If they don't, next week is going to be a big game for them too, as they host Monticello with another opportunity to get that 5th win. Greenfield Northwestern at Route is another game I'm looking at. Like I said, Route Catholic has to win one of their next 2 games in order to get into the playoff field. I believe this is the game that Route can do that. It would be an upset if they do, but if there's a better game to do it, it would be this one. in my opinion, for route. Johnston City at Cesar-Valliere. Once again, I'm already getting a bunch of JC folks reaching out to me saying, oh, Johnston City's going to beat Cesar-Valliere. Folks, you guys said that last year when I had Cesar-Valliere projected to be undefeated and be the number one seed in the playoffs. You guys came at me from TP Talk and other places. Johnson City's going to win. Johnson City's going to win. Johnson City's going to win. Blah, 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 blah. It's a toss-up game once again. I do have Cesar-Valliere favored. Could it go the other way around this year? It very well could. It is a game of interest simply for the fact that both teams will make the playoffs, but it could change some seeding around. So that's where the intrigue lies. And the last one I'm looking at is Tri-Valley at Eureka. Tri-Valley is 6-1. Eureka is 7-0. Eureka being in the Class 3A field. Tri-Valley being set in the Class 2A field. Big game here for both teams. For seeding purposes, conference title positioning. I like Tri-Valley in this one. They come into this game as the favorite despite having one loss already. I think Coach Roop and company get it done there. Looking at 8-man. How do the 8-man playoffs get determined? Was one of the questions I saw this week. Well, it's somewhat similar to 11-man, minus the fact that you don't have to figure out classifications because there is no classifications. In order for a team in 8-man to qualify for the playoffs, the school has to have an enrollment of 325 or less. Every team, there's 30 teams in IHSA, all 30 teams have an enrollment, whether it be the individual school and or the co-op of schools combined, everybody's enrollment is under 300. Therefore, every team in IHSA play technically is qualified to be playoff eligible. So, with that, how does the teams play out? Well, this field is set when you have the top 16 teams get seeded by wins, head-to-head play, winning percentage. Don't know how winning percentage plays into this one. I mean, you already have wins in there, and then you have head-to-head. So, I mean, you got wins, you got head-to-head. Where are you factoring winning percentage? I don't know, unless they're going to say that a team that has received forfeit wins, that's not a true winning percentage. But that's the third tiebreaker. The fourth tiebreaker, that's the second tiebreaker. The third tiebreaker then goes to playoff points, which is added up similar to the IHSA rules on their playoff points, which would be your opponent's wins. Now, one little catchy thing I've seen this week in the current playoff outlook for IHSA, and I've had some people questioning me on it too and bringing it to my attention as well, that they saw something a little fishy. Last year, we had a little bit of an issue with how the playoffs were put out seeding-wise. Between myself and Joe Murdian from A Spotlight on IHSA, our seedings were a little bit off from where other people had them, meaning other people, aka the IHSA. And I know that between myself and Joe, we study this stuff to a T. We take a look at what the bylaws are, but there was a team that was seeded lower than another team that they had actually beaten head-to-head comp. Still have not been able to put a finger on that one. The only thing I can think of is either A, there was multiple teams that had the same records, which there were. They went by straight playoff points, which doesn't make sense because one of the teams did play head-to-head, or two of the teams played head-to-head. That head-to-head should win out according to their bylaws. In this week's current playoff outlook, some teams' playoff points are added up by teams that they've only beat. while other teams have playoff points added up by every team that they've played. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there that I think they need to figure that out and do it right. You can't have one team getting playoff points for only the teams that they beat, and another team with the same record getting playoff points with every team that they face. It's got to be the same. It's either got to be your playoff points are your teams that you've played and their wins added up, or you got to do it by the teams that you beat with their wins added up. Which I do like that factor too. I think that's an interesting take because that would show you the strength of your schedule more so than just playoff points, because what teams are you beating? Are you beating good teams or are you beating bad teams? So, defeated opponents wins. Make that your playoff points. Do something. Be consistent. Because when you have an inconsistent model, it makes people double guess what you're doing. When you have that, you have loss of integrity, and then people don't trust what you're doing. Make it simple. You had a great format here. Keep it simple. Follow it. It's easy. It's fun. It rewards teams that win. Keep it that way. Just follow it. Stay consistent. All right. So, with that said, with 14 spots already being filled, we have 14 teams that have reached 5 wins or more in 8-man football. There's only 30 teams. So if you get to that 5th win, you're an automatic qualifier. Now, every year that we've had the current state of IHSA football, we've had 4 and 5 teams making the playoffs. I'm talking current state 2019 and after. Because 2018, there was only like 4 teams in the inaugural 8-man league, and they had a 14 playoff, which was basically a semifinal and an ad hoc state championship game between 2 winners. Yeah. Anyway, enough of that. 2019, they got more teams in there. Every team made the playoffs. If I remember correctly, there were 16 teams. 14 teams. There was 14 teams in 2019. Anyway, interesting little playoff. It worked out great. 2021, more teams came over, made the playoffs even more fun. Has been fun each of the last 3 seasons, by far, hands down. Great football in the upper levels of 8-man football in the state of Illinois. The 3 teams that are vying for the last 2 spots are Orangeville, Alden Hebron, and Metro East Lutheran. Every other team is officially eliminated below them. They only have 2 wins. They're not going to get it. They got 2 wins or less. They're not getting it. These 3 teams are the 3 teams it comes down to make the last 2 spots available in the playoffs. Orangeville, we'll start there. 3 and 4. Play AFC this week. AFC's 0-7. Orangeville wins that game. They're 4-4. But then they have to play perennial power and 2-time state champ, the Polo Marcos, who are undefeated, ranked number 1 in the state. That's going to be a tough go for the Broncos. Right now, Orangeville is projected to finish at 4-5. Alden Hebron is 3-4. They play Hiawatha and AFC. Out of these 3 teams, they have the highest playoff points. With that said, they also have probably the easiest schedule left with Hiawatha and AFC. Hiawatha is 1-6. AFC is 0-7. Alden Hebron makes the playoffs at 5-4. Wraps up that 15 seed. So, Metro East Lutheran is also 3-4. They play Blue Ridge and Schlarman. Schlarman has been, forfeiting their games the last few weeks, so I don't think that's going to be much of a problem for Metro East Lutheran to get that win there. But they do have to win this week against Blue Ridge. If they win this week against Blue Ridge, that's win number 4, gets them to 4-4, in a tie with Orangeville, so to speak. But Metro East Lutheran has a few more playoff points right now than Orangeville. So I think taking a look at it further, provided both teams get that fourth win, if they both were to lose a game at the same time and finish 4-5, I still feel Metro East Lutheran is going to be that 16 seed with Orangeville staying out of the playoff picture. So the Orangeville Broncos, like I've stated before, have to get to 5 wins to make the playoffs. That's the way I see it. So, some games to watch this week in 8-man. South Fork travels to Champaign to play St. Thomas More. Both teams are 5-2. Both teams were talked about as being teams to watch at the beginning of the year. They both were state ranked to start the season. Both picked up 2 losses, kind of getting some people like myself and others questioning how strong they truly are. We're going to see how each of these teams respond and what that game comes down to this week. Martinsville travels to Milford to play in Milford Cisna Park. Both teams are now 6-1. I was able to have the luxury of watching the Martinsville Pawnee game last week. I felt like Martinsville was one of those teams to definitely take a look at and keep an eye on all season long. In our state rankings, they were definitely ranked in the top 5 for the good majority of the season, have since now dropped down to like number 8 since their loss. Was not overly impressed with them in that game against Pawnee. Could have been a bad game that I watched for the Blue Streaks, or perhaps I saw what they truly are and they got exposed by Pawnee. Either way, I don't know. I'm intrigued in this game. I want to see how they respond from a loss to a team that, like I said before, some people expect us to have them ranked number 2 because they're 7-0. It's not how it works, but that's what they want. Playing Milford Cisna Park, who is typically a perennial power in the 8-man game. At the same time, Milford Cisna Park hasn't really played a whole lot of competition this year. They have 2 of those wins are forfeit wins. On top of that, they do have a loss on record already as they lost to St. Thomas More. So it kind of has me questioning the strength of the Bearcats, but we shall see. We shall see. The Bearcats put up a lot of points. They're averaging right around 50 points or so, maybe a little more. So, interested in that game. The other one is Flanagan Cornell Woodland at Ridgewood. So, Flanagan Cornell Woodland picked up a loss to Amboy here 2 weeks ago. They bounced back with a big win over West Central last week. Their other loss came to Ridgewood back in week 3, 30-7. So FCW is 5-2. Ridgewood enters at 6-1. Their lone loss came back in week 1 to Amboy. I'm interested to see how this game goes. Can FCW come back and beat Ridgewood, a team that they lost 30-7 to back in week 3? But they just got trounced on by Amboy 2 weeks ago, who was on a bounce back themselves from a loss to Ridgewood the week prior to that. I think Ridgewood is starting to gain more momentum. They took down the team that has taken them down the first 3 times that they played. Last year in the regular season, again in the state championship game, and then again in week 1. So they finally got that monkey off their back. They're the defending state runner-ups. They know that they have a team that can get to Monmouth or get back to Monmouth and play for a state championship. FCW lost all of their backfield, but they did return a lot of their line. And I say that because I come back to line play. Line play is what matters, even in 8-man football. You got to have a good line. You got to execute, but you got to have a good line. That's where FCW's strength lies. So I'm interested to see how that game plays out too, because if FCW can make this a game and turn around a 23-point loss back in week 3 and turn it into a potential victory and or play close, that's definitely going to boost them up, in my opinion, as being a team to watch further once we hit the playoff field. So anyway, that gives you a full look into week 7, a look into week 8, and a view of the playoff picture as we head into week 8. So, get out to the games. Get those Friday night lights in while they still last, because they are coming to an end. We only got 2 weeks left before the playoffs kick off, and we move to Saturday afternoon football. Support your teams. As always, root for the NUIC.